sort of stuff, and I'll bring that your way too.
Yeah. All right.
I've upgraded to a truck, so now it can fit in there.
Oh, now you have a little more room. Okay.
Yeah, I got a little more room now.
All right. Thanks.
Matt,
Yeah.
we're always so appreciative of you helping us out with that event. That the police department, it's been the chief's kind of baby for some years now, and he's really grown that with the help of his officers into a wonderful event for the community. And I know you guys are a big part of that, so we thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I enjoy coming out. It's definitely a good event.
So ladies and gentlemen, we are recording now. I am, however, going to wait for a couple minutes after 6 o'clock just to allow people to enter from the waiting room here. So please bear with us. Matt, will you be sharing the screen at all, or will Scott be sharing the screen at all?
Like with a PowerPoint?
Yes.
No, we
Okay.
we don't have a PowerPoint. We were looking at the questions, you know, that were submitted, and then we had looked at some of the stuff that we had talked about back and forth via email.
Okay.
So we can certainly make it kind of more of an open discussion. We were a little bit afraid if we did a PowerPoint, you know, that it would kind of deter that open discussion forum. So
Sure. And I'm not suggesting that we were in any way expecting it. I just wanted to make sure that if we were set up to share the screen, if you were going to use it, but we will not have to worry about that. So.
okay.
Good evening, ma'am.
Councilwoman Sturgis, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Good evening, Paul. Good evening, Lieutenant Diesel.
Getting lots of people. Good.
Oh, yeah, there's quite a few. It's growing.
I am so glad you're having this meeting. Our coyotes are so loud all night. It's crazy.
Yeah, I heard them the other night. They were quite loud. I think I hear them coming up from the metro parks, the howling.
Well, they're sort of in the hill between us and the people on Giles. And we have one who just brazenly marches across our backyard during the afternoon.
Matt, you do not need to unmute yourself. Welcome, Scott, by the way.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to mute everybody before we start here in a few moments. So when you gentlemen go to speak, you may have to unmute yourself. For all listening, I'm just going to ask that we all remain muted. It avoids the feedback we can get during a Zoom. And unfortunately, members of council and administration here have become privy to all the intricacies of the Zoom platform. So please, all questions are going to be taken at the end of the presentation. So please keep yourself muted. And then at the end, we can take questions from everybody. Welcome, everybody. If you're just tuning in, we're going to ask that everybody mute themselves during the presentation. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session where, of course, you can unmute yourself at that time. We're going to wait a few more minutes just so we can allow a few late arrivals to check in. Mr. Standard, sir, can you hear me? Okay, Paul, I think before we start, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host. And then when I'm giving my brief introduction, should people go to the waiting room, you could let them in. Do you know how to do that?
No, but I'm a quick study, so.
Then you know what? I can just do it on the fly. It's no big deal. Like I said, let's wait a few more minutes. So hopefully we'll get everybody in who's on time or a few minutes late here.
Who is that talking anyway?
Dan, I'm not mute. I wasn't mute. Hey, Dan, what? Your Honor, what's the way for me to do that?
Paul, I think we'll
The
just wait a few more
participants?
minutes. Let's see, if you go to, let's do this right now. If I go. All right, I'm making you the host now. So while.
Okay, now I can't hear you. I lost your audio.
How about now?
Now you're loud and clear, yeah, but I'm not seeing any
Okay.
additional controls for me to look in the waiting room.
If you go down to the bottom where it says participants
Yeah,
and click on that, you should see people in the waiting room.
yeah, I've got a list of everyone that's here.
And then is there anyone there that you can admit?
No.
It's showing.
Oh, wait a
42
minute, now there is.
Showing 42 participants.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay,
I
so
got it.
just
I just
as
let
they
someone
pop in there,
else-
just go ahead and admit them. So you're
That's
good to
fine.
admit people coming in then.
I got it.
Perfect. Okay, well, in the interest of everyone's time, it's 6:04. We're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to give my heartfelt thank you to everyone who's showing up. We live in a wonderful community that's often engaged on a number of issues, and this one I know is important to many of you, which is why you're here. But a thank you to Chief Kevin Wyant, Lieutenant Todd Dietzel, Wildlife Officer Scott Denneman, and Wildlife Officer Matt Madgar, who are both in attendance and will be doing the presentation today. My administrative assistant, Sherry Etta, has been instrumental in setting this up and messaging. Many of you are here today, so thank you to everyone. I also see we have some members of Village Council in attendance, and I want to thank Councilman Standard, Councilwoman Sturgis, Councilman Spencer, and I believe I saw Councilwoman Kosminski Vanderhart. Did you guys see any other members of council pop in?
David Emmerman is on the line as well.
Thank you, Councilman Emmerman. Thank you for showing up. Good. You're all well represented by a very engaged Village Council. I'm proud to work alongside them, and many of them are here, if not all of them are here today. So a little background is some of you have read in our messaging, coyotes are present in all 88 counties in the state of Ohio. You also know that they're present in Moreland Hills, which is why we're here. This issue tends to resurface every year or every other year. The major change is typically where they are. A number of years ago when I was on council, this issue was very big in the Hiram Trail, Hiram House Camp area. Not too long ago, a few years back, we saw a coyote in Forest Ridge, which kind of raised a stir. So really, they've been in the village for some time. As long as I can remember, I've seen them occasionally pop through our backyard. And what seems to change is the focus of where we have a higher concentration. This year, we're looking at primarily 2 neighborhoods, but not exclusively. The neighborhoods are the Mill Hollow, Jackson River Road area near the Metro Parks. And in my neighborhood of the Skyline, Bentleyville, Canyon Road, Green Tree area, where quite a few sightings have taken place, including some on trail cams, which I did share my footage with both wildlife officers who are here today, have seen that footage to give them an idea on time of day, size of animal, number of animals. Additionally, some people from those neighborhoods forwarded me pictures that they took, and I also forwarded those in preparation for this meeting to those officers. So residents have been calling, emailing, or checking in on social media with basically one of 2 concerns. They have a concern about the safety of themselves, their children, or their pets, or they just have some general inquiries about the habits of the animal and what to expect. Through social media and the immediacy of neighborhood chat groups, there's a lot of rapid ability to spread a lot of misinformation. And there's a good opportunity to spread some good information too. And that's what we're going to do today. So rather than conjecture and internet experts and Facebook pros, we brought in the real pros today from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, who are going to kind of take us through the Coyote 101 presentation, address some of our concerns that were submitted from people who couldn't be here tonight but did submit questions. And also they've been given bullet points by myself, a long list of bullet points of things that were expressed to me as your mayor that were concerned. So they've been prepared from a number of sources of input to get prepared for this meeting. After this meeting, we're going to package this information. We're recording this meeting right now. We'll post that on our Facebook page and our village website for those who couldn't attend, neighbors who you might want to share that link with. We'll also be wrapping things up on the village website. We'll address it in our next village newsletter. And of course, through social media, we'll provide that link and an update on how the meeting went. Tonight, you're also going to hear from our outstanding police department. Lieutenant Todd Dietzel in his capacity has been working with all things wildlife in the village for some time under the direction of his superior, Chief Wyant. Todd's been dealing with the ODNR officers and will be giving you a kind of 101 about what we do in Moreland Hills in terms of permitted things to do to get rid of a nuisance animal if that is ever an option on the table. He's also going to go through some very strict prohibitions we have on different practices that some might think are acceptable. That's about it. As with any issue, it's imperative that we consult with the experts, and we're here to do that today. You're all going to be muted temporarily while we go through the presentation. ODNR will be up next, then the police department, and then you can unmute yourselves for any questions that haven't been answered, although I'm confident many of them will be answered by the time we're done here. So with that, I'd like to once again thank and welcome Wildlife Officer Scott Denneman. He's with ODNR out of Geauga County. If you could raise your hand there, Scott. And we'd also like to welcome Wildlife Officer Matt Madgar from Cuyahoga County and thank him for his participation. So gentlemen, if you can unmute yourselves, we'll turn the things over to you and listen to your presentation.
All right, Matt, you good?
Can you hear me?
I got you, Matt. Mayor, can you hear me? Matt, you picking me up?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You
Mayor,
gentlemen,
can
we
you
can
hear
hear you both. You just might want to speak nice and loud for us. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, my name's Matt Madgar. I'm the Cuyahoga County Game Warden. I'm not sure, we don't really have a presentation or PowerPoint that we're going to present today. We went through and we looked at the questions that were submitted, and we looked through a lot of the information back and forth through the mayor and the police department of a lot of the concerns that a lot of you were having. We wanted to kind of make it a more of a Q&A as opposed to just putting up something on the screen there for you to read. So we'd like it to be open discussion. So we have a list of questions. I think there's about 8 that we got from residents. I'm not sure if anybody that's in the meeting right now would like to ask any questions or has anything that they want to address, and we can answer it as we go.
Yeah, Matt, I was sorry for the interruption. I was gonna suggest, due to the number of people we have, if you could perhaps just kind of go through the bullet points and the concerns I've expressed to you and the questions that you have, and kind of, formalize that a little bit more, and then we can take questions. Otherwise, from experience, I think we're just gonna have too many people talking over each other and trying to be recognized, and it'll be a little more difficult, I think. So I think we're gonna turn the floor over to both of you gentlemen first and let you kind of talk us through everything.
Sure. So if it's okay with you, I'd just like to kind of address the questions that were already asked, and I think it will address a lot of the bullet points that you had previously. And they're all really good questions. We got the question, is there any good news about coyotes? I know it's probably hard for a lot of people to believe, but there is good news about coyotes. They're great for pest control. They clean up a lot of rodents and things around the house that you wouldn't want. I know there's a lot of concern with the coyotes. The aggressive behavior and whether that plays a factor into it or not. But as far as the good news, I mean, they do a lot of cleanup and keep your house clean of rodents and things like that. So there are some positive impacts with them being around. Do you have anything to add to that, Scott?
No, that's the right mindset. I think the automatic response is to look at what negatives they're bringing, as far as pets or will they attack us. Most of their prey, based on their size, is smaller. They top out at about 40 pounds. Not that they can't get bigger, but not much bigger than that. And because of that size limitation, most of the things they eat are small. So all the things that you would have trouble with and would have to deal with yourself or have to bring somebody in to take care of, the chipmunks, the red squirrels that get into your attic, groundhogs digging underneath your shed, the raccoons that get in, all those things are lessened by having that population of coyotes. Those are things that they feed on. So that is I don't want to call it a service they perform, but it is a benefit of having them around. It's just one of the things they do. So it's not all negative. There are plenty of positives to having them there.
I know, another question that was asked was, how worried should I be for my animals if I have a fence in the yard? I know, coyotes are just like any other animal. They're going to want to take the path of least resistance. It's the same with deer. You see deer in your yard all the time. Not as likely with a fence, depending on the height, but coyotes are very similar in the sense that if you have a fence that, it's a barrier keeping them out, they're not having easy access to things like food or compost piles or anything like that that you may have. If you have outdoor pets, food that you might have laid out. Cuyahoga County is so urbanized and it's so easy for them to find food, and that's why they keep coming around the urban areas and the residents and things like that. So if you have a fence, and again, I don't want to say get a fence because I don't know what the city ordinances are or anything like that for a fence, but if you have a fence, it's certainly going to benefit as far as, them being able to get in your yard or anything like that. So, if there's areas where it's more open or there's backyards without fences, that's probably going to be where they're, going to tend to go just because it's easier for them.
It also becomes a matter of I guess, mission focus on that individual animal, not every single animal, but in that one particular situation, depending on the type of fence and what's inside the fence. I want to say there's been footage of them going over a 6-foot chain link, not in a single bound, but they'll climb up a chain link fence and back down the other side. They're pretty agile, but what's inside that fence? Why are they motivated? What does it want to do? What has that individual had success doing before? So a fence can be a good precaution, but it's not absolute. I mean, consider yourself. If there's something you want bad enough, what are you willing to do to go get it? Same applies to an animal.
Then, another good question that came in was just to discuss some of the dangers of having indoor slash outdoor pets, especially cats. It's definitely, something that you have to think about if you have outdoor pets. There are coyotes everywhere throughout the state, so we do have to learn to adapt. We have to learn to live with them. Like we said, it's not all bad things. A coyote, they're not predominantly, seeking out, dogs or cats or things like that. But if it's an available food source or something like that, it is a possibility. We always say, especially when coyotes are very active during that January, February, March into March time frame, you want to keep an eye on your pets if you're letting them out. I don't know, the circumstances for everybody, but if you've got a leash on the pet, or you've got one of those yard leashes or anything, we just recommend, definitely keeping an eye. If you've got a pet that spends all day outside, it can be more concerning because you don't know where coyotes are going to go or be. And just like any other wildlife, they do roam around, especially with the metro parks there. It's a great habitat for them, and like the mayor said, they'll come up from the metro parks and people will see them. So it's definitely something you want to keep an eye on, and you want to always kind of watch your pets if you're letting them out, especially during those times of year when they are active.
One of the things, I've worked the area and lived, I'm in Chester now, but I've lived either in or adjacent to the valley for the better part of 20 years. This is nothing new. They've been here the entire time that I've lived here. They were here before I got here. But one of the things I like to refer to is statistics, and believe me, math is not my strong point, but with the amount of coyotes we have here and the amount of pets, dogs, cats, whatever you want to factor in. And I'll take it even beyond pets to the amount of children we have running around. And this goes throughout North America, because this population of coyotes is not a Moreland Hills thing. It's not a Cleveland thing. This is the entire country. Suburbs, urban, they have them in Central Park in New York City, downtown Chicago, there's coyotes. If it was going to be an issue, it would already be an issue. You wouldn't be able to turn on your news feed without reading about someone else got attacked today. There were another 2 attacks in Los Angeles. There was an attack in Chicago. This is not the case. To a lesser extent with pets, it's tougher to get those statistics, because if a cat doesn't come back or a dog goes out at night and doesn't come back and we don't witness that attack, we really don't know what happened. Your pets are more in danger from various illnesses, traffic, crossing the road.
Can't hear a thing.
Are you able to hear? There was a question about hearing her.
Sunshine, we'll hold sunshine for Sunday with mid-40s. Don't forget that time change. I mean, how can they forget it at this? But then rain does return to Monday.
There might be an issue with Miss Frankel's feed. I'm not sure here, Mayor.
Yeah, a couple nice days ahead.
Is it on now?
Okay, I got a note that they can hear us.
Yeah.
So
Paul, I
was
think
first-
you need to mute people when that happens. I don't think I can anymore.
Okay. So Mayor, if I'm on the right, I was talking about statistically, this would be much more of an issue than what we see it to be. So can it happen? Can you lose a pet? Yes. Have there been documented attacks of children and people throughout the country? Yes, there have been, but you can count them maybe on 2 hands. It's not a prevalent thing given the numbers that exist. So I wouldn't base a good part of my life or my day on whether or not, if I go out to get the mail this morning, will I be preyed upon by a coyote? It's not real likely. You're more likely to slip on the ice or have a tree branch fall on you on the way to the mailbox than you are getting attacked by a coyote. I wouldn't base a great part of my concern in my daily life on that happening.
Scott, one of the questions that Ethan Spencer just put into the chat says, has there been any aggressive behavior from coyotes reported in the village? Have there been any attacks? If so, can you share any of the circumstances and what we should do to avoid or minimize future attacks? I think you addressed a lot of that. I've only been here a few years. I've never heard, of a coyote attacking somebody in Moreland Hills. I've never got a call about that or anything. Scott's been here a lot longer and has covered the area. I don't know if you have, Scott.
There was one, and Chief or Lieutenant, if you want to jump in on this, I'll just mention it because, we tell both sides of it. I've been kind of pro coyote here, but it's about individuals, not a population. You're going to have a population of coyotes that is going to fluctuate. It'll be high some years, low other years, depending on what's happening, where they den, which coyote died or did not. But you may occasionally have an aggressive individual. There was an aggressive individual in the Forest Hills Preserve region. That one individual was dealt with, and there hasn't been any issues since. So if you have a reoccurring issue with one individual animal and you can remove that animal, then that solves that problem. You're much better going about it that way than to, we're going to reduce or remove our coyote population. That's not going to happen. You're not going to accomplish that. And it actually does the opposite. When you open up a gap, it fills with coyotes from surrounding areas. They will find that gap and fill it up because it's an available space. So you're much better off removing a problem individual than trying to go after the bunch.
And I think your comment there, just the next question was, is there a way to get rid of some of the coyotes? And just saying that there's quite a few in the area, and you address that. You can trap, have a nuisance trapper come in and trap some of them out. But like Scott said, if there's a gap, there's other coyotes in the surrounding areas that are gonna come in there and fill that gap. And you'll never get rid of every coyote in the area. It's not possible. So you can minimize them, yes, but just like any animal, they'll repopulate, and there will be more, essentially.
And again, if you, is there a way to deter from having litters in your backyard? They den where they den. They find an opportunity, whether it be an existing groundhog burrow or a collapsed foundation of an old barn. I realize that doesn't exist a whole lot in Moreland Hills, but they find an opportunity. It's a sunny hillside. Mom likes that spot, and she picks it out, and that's where they den. Now, if you have one of those spots and it exists on your property, let them get through let them get through the cycle, and then when that cycle is done, this year is done, fill that den in or make it less attractive to them. I would not suggest going into a den and trying to wipe out that entire coyote family. It's just not the way to go about it, but make the site less attractive once they've moved out for the year, and they'll move on to another spot.
You can ask your question now.
Do coyotes attack foxes?
Canines don't do well together. Wolves don't tolerate coyote real well. We don't have wolves, so that moving up factor doesn't come into play. But with the fox, coyotes, they'll remove them as a competitor because they eat very similar things, so they will remove them. But one of the things the fox do, which is kind of cool, fox are much more tolerant of people, and they're pretty social, so they'll den underneath your back deck or your shed, or very close to a house they'll put a den. And so you might have the opportunity to watch a fox raise its family right in your backyard, which to me is kind of neat. But the coyote and the fox don't get along well. Does that answer your question? Sure.
So another one that came in is, what times of year are they most active? Definitely January, February into March. Those are going to be, their most active time of the year. And then just kind of going off of our last question here, it says someone suggested using an air horn when outside with your pets on a leash to scare the coyotes off. Definitely, showing dominance, and kind of making noise, making them feel uncomfortable, is definitely, one of the things we say. And it's the same with, when people are always asking us questions about deer, how do I get deer out of my yard? Essentially, if an animal feels welcome and unthreatened, they're going to continually come back to that area because they feel safe and comfortable there. So, it may scare your dog if you're blowing an air horn that close to it, but it's certainly going to scare, a coyote too. Making noise, anything like that, is good to kind of make a coyote not feel welcome and not want to come back to that area.
Matt, if I can interject here, if I could have you two comment on, I would say overwhelmingly the concerns expressed to my office have been related to the sightings of the animal. Some people living in neighborhoods that haven't seen them in the past are seeing them, and it's very daunting. There have been reports that there are groups of 3 and 4 traveling together. Some years ago, doing the same platform, we were advised that the hunting pack mentality exhibited west of the Mississippi is typically not exhibited east. So if you could comment on that. And then specifically, the one concern I did have relates to a Bentleyville Road resident who did report seeing multiple animals in her backyard. And her concern was that she was in the backyard with the dog and the coyote got in a stare down match. The coyote was about 50 feet away and just wasn't backing down when she was yelling at it and clapping her hands and screaming at it. So my second follow-up question is that meet your criteria of a nuisance or an aggressive animal? And would that be something that this individual would want to hire a nuisance trapper for? Or is that something that could be typical and not something to be overly afraid of?
I mean, especially with the urban areas, wildlife in general gets so adaptive to people and traffic and things like that. So the fact that, you're clapping at it or something like that, and it might not be afraid or it might not run away, that animal acts totally different than a completely rural coyote where it's not used to seeing people. But, here in Cuyahoga County, these sort of urbanized areas, they are just so used to seeing people and it's just become the norm, and they're a very adaptive animal and they can learn to live, anywhere. And like Scott said, they could be very close to a house, if they have a den or anything like that. But yeah, it's definitely the norm for an urban area, that they're used to seeing people.
Okay. And would you count that description as something that residents should be overly concerned about? I know we did set up a trail cam in this individual's yard, my trail cam that I used in my yard, which I sent you the footage from. The presence in our yard on Skyline is pretty much gone away. It was daily a coyote coming up through my neighbor and my house. I have not caught it now on 5 consecutive days with the trail cam. Same thing for this individual reporting that coyote that stared her dog down. We set it up in her yard. She purchased some blinking lights, infrared lights at night, which may have helped, but we didn't catch anything in 5 days at her yard. So having that one instance, how would you classify that encounter, and what would be your advice for that homeowner who's not here tonight and able to comment?
I mean, it's definitely one of those things, just going back to, you're taking a chance if you let your pet outside without a leash. You don't know where wildlife is going to be and when they're going to be there. So I don't think it's anything to be super concerned about it, unless the coyote's coming up and being very, very aggressive. It could be curious, but I would absolutely, keep your pet on a leash, or at a minimum, keep your eyes on your pet when it's outside. Because if they are living close to the house, you don't know what the confrontation might be.
Now, could we tell this individual that her pet after March, let's say April and May, it's a little bit more safe for that dog to run into the backyard?
Yeah, I mean they're a lot less active, but again, I would definitely, unless you have a fence or anything like that, be a little bit reluctant to just let a pet out without watching it, or at least keeping an eye on it a little bit.
Thank you.
Hey, it's all right. It's okay. Thanks. Bye. Sorry, folks, this is my comm center. Yeah, say your dog has a stare down with a coyote. If it happens one time in the yard, then Mayor, you say you put a trail cam out, you don't see it for 5 more nights, that's a one-off. You're gonna run across each other. Just again, you exist in the same place, you're gonna run into each other. But if every time I go out with a dog, I'm greeted by the same coyote, then that's a problem. But if it's one time there's a stare down in the backyard, I don't know that I'm gonna go out and spend the money for a nuisance trapper, and it will be money for a nuisance trapper. Your general setup, I can't even tell you what they are right now, but if I'm a trapper, I'm looking at Moreland Hills, I'm gonna come up, see the house, and go, okay, I know what my call out is gonna be. It's gonna be about 150 to 200. I'll get set up. Then my charge rate per animal, and I'm just guessing here, but it's gonna be close, 75 to 100 per animal. And they'll be happy to keep running those traps and keep trying to catch coyotes off your property, as long as you want to keep paying them. And since there are coyotes there, they're going to catch some, but it's money you don't need to spend, is what I generally tell folks.
Right.
There was a question, what does the nuisance trapper do with the animal? Well, mostly the traps they're setting are lethal traps. The most effective coyote, it depends on the trapper, but the more effective has been snaring. Most of those result in a kill. That's what they're there to do. They're not going to come in. There's really not a scenario where they come in, live trap the coyote, and take it somewhere and release it. And they can't do that via our laws because coyotes can carry rabies. We don't take a potential rabies carrier from one area and let it go in another.
And I was just kind of looking over your bullet points here too, that we had sent back through email. And I think we have kind of glanced over mostly everything through those bullet points, through some of the questions. I wasn't sure, just looking through here real briefly, if there was anything else, that's on the top of your list that's concerning, or that you've been getting a lot of input from residents on.
Yeah, I think you've hit on the essentials, right? People are worried about their pets. They're worried about kids. I think you've done quite a bit to dispel the notion that these coyotes are harmful to humans. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong in recapping anything, but it sounds to me like you're saying that threat is very, very minimal. In terms of pets, we're looking at in a more aggressive area of January, February, and March. And then while your opinion isn't going to be carte blanche to let your pet roam free, the statistics would suggest that the behavior is less aggressive, towards small pets at that time. I know in my neighborhood, my son saw a coyote 8 years ago, and then we haven't seen him for a couple of years. Then the neighbor saw one, and then a couple of years later, I saw one with a rabbit in its mouth. And then a couple of years went by, we didn't see him, and now we have a group of them. So I agree, with Scott's assessment that they've been in Moreland Hills, in our neighborhood for some time now. So I think you've done a good job hitting on the majors. I guess if there's nothing else specifically you'd like to address, I think we can open it up to questions. And I think the best way to do that, and Mr. Standard, you can help out with this. If you can go to your participant bar down there, you can raise your hand. Let's see, if you go to the reactions, I believe you can do a thumbs up or something like that. We can see you. If that's not going to work, you can just unmute yourself. We might talk over each other a little bit until somebody gets the dominant question going. But Mr. Standard, if you can see anyone with a thumbs up that you can unmute.
I do not have that button, Your Honor.
Well, you would just see somebody's picture. With
Okay,
a thumbs up.
yeah, I got some hands up here. You want me to just pick one and let it go?
Sure.
All right, there you go.
Maybe say who it is so they know.
So that's H. Baston. And I think I can then turn their, let them unmute them?
Yep,
Okay, can you hear me?
yep.
We can.
Okay, perfect. My question was also in the chat, but since I had the same question, is can they easily jump fences? So you mentioned the difference between a fence, if you're fenced yard versus a dog on the leash, but same question as far as kids in the backyard. Are the coyotes likely to stay outside of the fence, or do they jump them with no problem?
So
Go ahead, Matt.
no, I was just going to say, Scott answered it briefly earlier, but like he said, it depends on what's in the backyard. It depends on, how bad they want to get in the backyard. It's not something we would say that is typical of their behavior, but it's not something that's impossible for them to do either. And like Scott had said, there's probably videos out there or something of coyotes, scaling a fence or something, not in one leap or anything like that, but it's definitely possible, depending on how bad they would want to get in a backyard. But the accessibility of other food sources or other things that they would want to get to is much greater than trying to climb a fence.
Okay, thank you.
Your hand.
Okay, Chris Tessar has a question, so I'm going to ask her to unmute.
Hello, everybody. So I wanted to give you a suggestion. I keep a tambourine and a thingy. Oh, my dog's barking. She doesn't like it. Oh, sorry. And I have used Lily. No. Shh. And I have used this to scare away coyote. At first, they just look. But then they turn around and they kind of saunter rhythmically away. So I keep this by my door at all times, and I never let my dog out after dark or before daybreak without a leash. So I just thought I'd share that with you all. Thank you.
That's a good suggestion.
Yep, I'm done. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Your Honor, I don't have anyone else raising their hand at the moment.
Oh,
I believe the Nugers are raising their hand.
Okay, your mic's off. Go ahead.
Mark, do you hear us or not?
Yep.
Okay. We hear them very frequently throughout the night and sometimes even in the late afternoon. Sometimes they're close, sometimes they're extremely close. I'd like to know a little bit about their behavior. When I'm hearing a lot of them, frantic stuff going on, tons of yelping and howling of multiple individuals, I'd like to know, what are they doing? Are they hunting? Do you know anything about how they're versus solitary people who are solitary coyotes that are howling? Do you know what they're doing and why, and what part of their activity that is?
I'm not an expert on all the various vocalizations. What I will do, and I talked about this with the mayor before, it's been a minute since I read it, but if you want to know more about them, there's been a book out very recently, last 5 to 10 years. It's called Coyote America by Dan Flores. It's a good read. It's recommended by a lot of folks. I listen to them on a podcast. I've read the book. It's a good source of information. There are other books out there, to be sure, but we are not the only sources of information. There are folks that their entire specialty is coyotes. Matt and I deal with the entire spectrum of wildlife. So we know just enough about each. You want somebody that did their master's thesis on coyotes. Read that book. And they'll be able to tell you, okay, when I hear this, that's what that is. When they do this, that's kind of what that means. And knowledge takes away that fear of the unknown. Now that I understand a little bit more about what they're doing, I'm less concerned with it. I'm sorry, I got sirens going off behind me, and it was I was waiting to hear coyote falling up behind it. I thought it would be somewhat interesting to have that happen right now. So, yeah, I would recommend that book. I've read it. It's been a few years since I read it, but I remember thinking it was worth my time, even doing this as a profession. So read a couple things, watch some video online, do a little bit of research on it, and it answers some of those questions for you and takes away the unknowns.
Scott, one of the things I've heard is that those who hear, and I hear them too, I just heard them the other night. I watched a couple different quote unquote expert videos, and the consensus was a lot of times what sounds like 50 or 60 animals to somebody is actually 3 or 4.
Right.
They do rapid succession howling, overlapping each other. And while it may be hard to believe, when you hear that kind of cacophony of all the animals together, it doesn't always mean that there's 12 or 13 of them together. It could be much smaller than that.
And that howling too, I mean, that could be anything from, calling other coyotes to an area, to a hunting situation. Or I've had many times where, like Scott says, you'll hear a police siren or something like that, and they just all go crazy. And they just, a bunch of them just start going, and howling. So it is, a read like that would definitely be appropriate to know more about their behavior.
We ask that you repeat that title and author one more time.
That's actually, I pulled it up online here, so I'd have it. Where did you go here? Coyote America, A Natural and Supernatural History, and that's by Dan Flores, Flores.
Thank you. Paul, I can help you with some questions coming up in chat.
I think Councilman Spencer had a question.
I did. Thank you, Councilman Stannard. I just wanted to share with people something I shared at the committee of the whole last week, which was I've had a lot of animals in my yard, and I think a lot of these animals are potential prey for coyotes. And what I realized was that I've had birdseed feeders, in particular, the sunflower seeds, and they have attracted all kinds of animals. I've had tons of squirrels, tons of chipmunks, and all these are prey for coyotes, I would imagine. And since I eliminated that, the reason I did was because I had raccoons coming in my yard and spraying, and then I had a skunk spraying my dog. I eliminated that, and the quantity has gone down a lot. And I guess my question is, if you do that, does that help reduce the likelihood that coyotes are going to enjoy your yard because they don't have as much food? They're looking for food.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, they're always on the look for food, or always on the look for something of that nature. So, if it's not around, they're going to move on to the next best place. So, if you have an abundance of, the chipmunks or things like that, they know it's an easy food source, they know it's an easy target, they will continue to come around, especially if it's that plentiful. But, the fact that, you're eliminating that, and you're not seeing as many, they're going to continue to move throughout the neighborhood or move throughout different yards to look for more food.
I mean, we love bird watching, so we like to have something to attract birds, but we're trying to be selective in what we're doing, because you got to realize the consequences of some of those food materials.
Councilman Spencer brings up a great point that I don't think we covered yet, and there's additional suggestions for keeping these animals out of the yard. I believe your website, Matt, talked about keeping your grill area clean, pet food, all that stuff. So some good tips on that website as well.
There's a question on my screen. Are they, is the presence of coyotes a sign of a healthy ecosystem? Yeah, the more animals you have there that belong there, they're native. You're going to have predators in the system. So that is a sign of a healthy system.
Mr. Foreman has a question about whether or not coyotes are nocturnal.
Not exclusively. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, It's very likely to see them during the daytime. They are, I would say a lot more active at night than they are during the day. Typically, they're headed to dens and kind of resting during the day, and they are a lot more active at night. But it's not rare, especially in an urban area where they're constantly getting disturbed. You could be cutting wood in the backyard and don't know there's a den back there, and then you'll see coyotes. So I would say in an urban area, it's a lot more likely to see them during the day. But they do predominantly come out at night, but it's not impossible to see them during the day.
And Marcy Younger wanted to know whether or not they're attracted to ponds.
I mean, it's going to be a food source for them. There's snakes, frogs, all that sort of thing around a pond. Different critters coming to the pond. So I would say, it's definitely not going to be a deterrence for them. If there's a plentiful food source for them, which there typically would be around a pond.
Okay, I think Mr. Norwick has his hand up, so let's go ahead and unmute him. Mr. Norwick, are you
Yes,
turning
I'm
your
here.
mic off? There you go. You had a question?
No, it's more of a follow-up actually to Councilman Spencer's question about the bird feed. I actually had the same issue with multiple squirrels, chipmunks, etc., because I have multiple feeders out. And actually this year what I did was I bought little trays that fit on the bottom of the feeders. So it actually captures a lot of the feed before going to the ground. And that really has seemed to minimize the number of squirrels and chipmunks in my yard this year. So it's much more of a tip, I guess, just putting the trays down on the bottom of the feeders. That's all. Thank you.
I was going to say, I saw that Michelle asked if coyotes are used to people's noises, how do we scare them away if they come close? I mean, I would say they're used to seeing people acting normal, doing day-to-day routine, leaving the house, coming back, getting the paper, that sort of thing. But they're not going to be used to somebody, kind of carrying on, or, hitting that tambourine or a noisemaker or anything like that. So I still think there's still possibility to scare them away through the noises. But they're just used to seeing normal people behavior in urban areas.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to ask that we let, before we take more questions, and Paul, thank you so much for helping navigate that. I appreciate your assistance, Councilman Standard.
Sure.
While we I'd like to continue while we still have a good audience here with Lieutenant Todd Dietzel, who is going to comment, based on all the information we've heard up to this point, options for residents in terms of nuisance trapping and what certain prohibitions exist in the village. So we'll turn it over to Todd now. Lieutenant Dietzel.
Thank you very much. Got distracted there by background noise. I apologize about that. Basically, what the way of Moreland Hills is, can I back up to some incidents that we've had in Moreland Hills? I can only think of in maybe the last 5 or 10 years where there's been an incident. One of those was already addressed with the Forest Ridge Preserve, where a coyote was approaching a couple of individuals with their dog, more or less walking them out of the park. And that was during the springtime when, the mothers had their pups. And in these situations, anytime we have anything, we always confer with our state partners with ODNR. And we did talk to Officer Denneman at the time, and we got recommendations on how we needed to handle that situation. And that problem animal was taken care of, was dealt with. Prior to that, maybe one incident where a dog and a coyote got into a little bit of a scuffle. The resident called us and we checked the area. And as far as our response as a police department to these incidents, and we will come out to any call for service. We are not going to, search out these animals and put them down. Obviously, we go there to see if there's an immediate situation that we could possibly handle, and then we'll report that to our state partners with ODNR. In those situations, it is the property owner's responsibility to handle any kind of wildlife issues on their property. We don't have a wildlife management division for the village of Moreland Hills. So we do our best to make sure it's not an immediate problem. And then we will call Mr. Madgar or Mr. Denneman. And before Mr. Madgar was here, we would call Mr. Denneman. So we do, like I said, we confer a lot with our state partners as far as kind of any kind of wildlife issues. But more importantly, recently is the coyote issue. As far as options that you have, I know that the ODNR has a comprehensive list for each county who is a registered wildlife management company that can come out and trap those coyotes. I did print that off today. There's a link that we can provide you, or can't rattle it off right now, where there's a company that there's companies on there you can call. My ODNR partners there, I was looking at that list today, and I recognized some of the names on there as companies that I don't believe all of them are equipped to necessarily deal with coyotes. I know that's a specialty, something that somebody needs to know what they're doing. They're smart animals, and it could be quite costly. But as far as trapping them, Moreland Hills, we're very strict in that we are a non-projectile town. You cannot discharge a firearm in the village of Moreland Hills. And we do enforce that rule pretty staunchly. We do have a hunting program, a deer hunting program that I've been here for 22 years. It's been here since I've started in Moreland Hills. So during the deer bow season, which this year ran from end of September to early February, the individuals that wish to hunt have to fill out a permit, and it's basically a contract between the hunter and the residents. We manage the program. There's strict guidelines that hunters need to follow in order to hunt, and there's an acreage minimum. We have had some of those property owners and the hunters ask us if they could take out the coyote, hunt the coyote, even though there's an open season, because they're viewed a nuisance animal. Moreland Hills does not have a hunting program, and it's not something that we wish to pursue as far as hunting coyote. Any questions to any of that before I continue to go on? Anybody? Mayor, do you have anything that you want to add, up until that point about the?
No, I think you nailed it, Lieutenant. The concerns have been, can I bring in a friend who hunts and would like the pelts, who would use a bow, because they liken it to the program you just mentioned. And it's important that we distinguish, as you did, that we do not conflate the two. We do have a very well monitored qualification permitting process for those to come in and hunt limited deer. That does not apply to coyotes. So unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever side of the fence you're on, we do not allow that. So you did go over that. And the non-projectile is imperative. We are a small, intricate village consisting of pocket neighborhoods with woods between various neighborhoods, where projectiles such as arrows and bullets can travel through and hurt and harm and damage property. And so we are going to take a very strict approach in terms of hunting these animals. Just to allow the hunting of them carte blanche in a village of our size, populated like ours is dangerous, it's unsafe, and it's not something we're going to pursue. So, Lieutenant, I think that leads us to your recommendation with the list of nuisance hunters. The unfortunate aspect is that can be costly. And, a lot of times people don't.
Well, it's a huge expense. It can be expense to, the homeowner. We've had one recommendation somebody mentioned a while ago, just through, I think, a social media comment about sterilization. I don't, I've talked briefly to for that. I look at it this way, and I think I can speak for the chief is that do we really have, is this a problem or a concern? It's obviously it's a concern for the health and safety of animals. This is obviously a concern. I'm going to go and say, I don't know if this is a problem. I mean, you know, obviously we've seen a lot of activity during the winter where they're hunting and foraging for food. You're going to see some in the spring when they're, you know, when they have pups and they're out hunting and maybe protecting their dens. But I think we need to learn to live with them and cohabitate and not eradicate the population. And that's you know, we've always stood by that mindset here in Moreland Hills. I think that a lot of the recommendations that, you know, we've seen over the years, and Mr. Spencer, you addressed that, is removing food sources, eliminates food sources for the coyotes, and that seems to work. Yeah, we will. I don't think it's a good idea for us to go out and just removing, you know, you remove a problem animal, we're never going to completely eradicate the coyote population. And, you know, I know Mr. Denneman and Mr. Madgar have given us a great education. I talked to you both off this call, is that it's going to continue. We just need to learn to live with them.
Lieutenant, can you comment about there was some misinformation floating around that the Moreland Hills Police Department responded to a call on Green Tree Road and
can you repeat the question? Mayor, I'm sorry,
can you respond to the misinformation that was out there that suggested a Moreland Hills police officer responded to a call on Green Tree and shot and killed a coyote?
After I was made aware of that call, the chief and I did look into that through our CAD logs, and there was no such, we did put down an animal called, just like our ODNR partners out, somebody had injured animal, deer, raccoon. The humane thing for us to do in those cases is to, you know, unfortunately to put the animal down. But we do not, you know, if we've had deer are dragging legs, if they're still moving, you know, we let nature take its course and the animal continues to move. We're not going to chase animals down to put them down. Okay. So no, there was not any such incident.
Thank you, Lieutenant Dietzel. Chief Wyant, did you have anything to add, sir?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think the lieutenant covered it, particularly the seriousness of those that have had questions regarding, you know, other means to get rid of coyotes that they feel are a problem. And the hazards are just too great for individuals to start doing anything with regard to that. So again, they've been around forever, and we just continue to live with them. The lieutenant spoke previously about the deer program, and even with that deer program, you know, there's a proficiency test that the hunters have to pass before they're permitted to hunt during that deer program. So, you know, the possibilities of injury is just too great. I just wanted to make emphasis on that, we've just got to learn to get along with them. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. And we're going to go back to Councilman Stannard at this point, I believe, and he can navigate those raising their hands to ask questions, or perhaps reading some in the chat that have not been answered yet.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Your Honor. Your Councilwoman Laura Kosminski-Vanderhart has a question.
Thank you, Councilman. It's more of a comment in follow-up to what Lieutenant Dietzel was saying about, you know, a valid concern, obviously, versus an actual problem. And just as an animal rights advocate and veterinarian, I would just encourage people that do have concerns and are worried about that developing into a true problem to please reach out to the police or, you know, to the ODNR before, you know, potentially pursuing a trapping option. You know, there, as the ODNR officials have mentioned, you know, it is a fatal, something that often ends fatally for the animal. It's not a pleasant thing to witness. I've seen the traps before. And so just to, you know, if there's deterrence that you can use before calling on a trapper and using that list, or again, reaching out to professionals for some guidance, that would, I think, be in the best interest of everybody, not just the animal, especially if they're, you know, the population is just going to fill with another animal from another area. So that's just my encouragement from a veterinary standpoint. Thank you.
Councilwoman Vanguard, I mirror that sentiment. I think the nuisance hunter is an absolute last option only if we are dealing with an aggressive defined animal that has posed a significant threat. I think for the errant coyote running through the back of someone's yard to go out and hire a nuisance hunter, I would not be in favor of that. There are, of course, individual property rights, as Lieutenant Dietzel pointed out. But I too think that agree with both wildlife officers that we can, kind of live in harmony with these animals to a great degree, and it's happening all over the country in every county in Ohio. So I think that nuisance trapper is expensive for one, but more importantly than that, I think that should be a last option for our residents who are truly experiencing a threat from an aggressive nuisance animal.
Mayor, there's a few questions on the chat regarding coyotes' influence on other animals. Do they do anything for the deer or against the deer? And then another question was relative to bears. Are there anything we need to know about bears while we have ODNR here?
I mean, I would say, oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say regarding not the bear question yet, but the deer population. A coyote is a natural born hunter. When a fawn is born, essentially they have no scent. That is their defense mechanism. I know a lot of people are always asking, about fawns in their flower beds or something like that, and we say don't touch them, don't pick them up, don't move them. The mom leaves them there because she thinks it's a safe place, and that's where she's going to come back to, thinking that the fawn is still going to be there. They do hunt deer, I guess you'd say, and how much it affects the deer population. For Cuyahoga County, I know the deer population is healthy and growing, so it's not putting that big of a dent into it. But it's not, out of their wheelhouse to, prey on deer, especially, if it's a weak deer that has maybe a broken leg, or like Lieutenant Dietzel said, if it's an injured deer that's still able to get around, but just barely, it's going to look at that as an easy food source. So they can seek deer out, but essentially they're going to look for easy methods to get food.
I'll take the bear question only because I've got a larger body of knowledge to draw from being here for a longer period of time. We do occasionally get a wandering bear into the greater Chagrin Valley. For the most part, we haven't, I won't even say for the most part, we've never had an issue. I think we had one get into Warrensville Heights 10, 12 years ago. These are almost always 2-year-old males, which is the equivalent of a teenage boy. That's who ends up, in trouble. It's just what it is. So they get in, I'll get a couple pictures. Somebody will send me a picture out of Gates Mills or Hunting Valley or Moreland. For the most part, it's somebody that knows how to get a hold of me. They'll send me a picture. Hey, I had one at my feeder, and they stay quiet about it. That way it doesn't raise any alarms, and the thing hangs out for a little while and leaves. Bears want to eat, sleep, and be left alone, just like me. They don't want to cause any problems. They just want to, go about their day, and they don't cause any issues. So could we have one? Maybe, but it hasn't been an annual thing. Every once in a while, one will pop up, and then that's it. So.
Officer Denneman, we did, interestingly enough, I have a reason that I have a suspicion that the question is being asked because about a week ago, we had two bear together tipping over some trash cans behind one of the homes on Skyline in my neighborhood. So my son down in college has joked around that our neighborhood's been like Jumanji with the presence of coyote, bear. I know you responded a few days ago to, I believe, a report of a mountain lion in Warrensville Heights, or one of you did. It turned out not to be, but interestingly enough, we do have bear appear in Moreland Hills and did so last week.
Did anyone get photos on those?
No, I do have some photos of the prints. The snow was kind of wet and melting, so we have really good large prints with the claws going into them right around the garbage cans. I can send you those. They were about the size of the person who took them. She said it was the size of her hand fully extended, was about the size of the paw. So I'll send you the pics.
Sure.
Mayor, you're up to date then. That's all the hands and all the chat lines.
Okay. If anyone in attendance has another question or comment, raise your hand and flash the screen like this, and we'll make sure we catch you. If not, we're going to assume everything has been asked and answered. I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank Wildlife Officer Scott Denneman and Officer Matt Madgar. We appreciate your professionalism. You may be hearing from us if we have any concerned residents who, after today, think they do have an aggressive animal that needs attention. As Lieutenant Dietzel pointed out, we'll always be consulting you for guidance. We appreciate your leadership and your quick effort to respond to emails and phone calls and participate in the Zoom like this. We thank you for that very much. And with that,
We're happy to be here, and we're always available for questions. Call Matt or myself anytime.
okay. And what I'll do is we're going to make a bullet point list of kind of all the information we got here tonight, and I'll have you two review it if you don't mind first, and then we'll once it's vetted through you, we'll go ahead and include it, in our messaging to our residents who may not have been in attendance. But we will immediately share this link to this presentation on our website and on social media. So
yes, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
And Paul, I think you're going to have to end the meeting there.
Okay, what about your recording? Just stop that first.
Yeah, stop the recording and then you can close the meeting. And
All right, everybody, take care. Have a safe night.
good night.
Good night.